We looked around in New York City, had a nice little visit. The next day, they sent us up to Massachusetts into a Army Air Force base. We got on the plane the next day, and I thought, wait a minute, this is backwards. I'm supposed to be facing the front. The Army had different thoughts on that. You face the back of the plane because if you had an accident, your survival rate was much better. We flew to Frankfurt, Germany, got the introduction to some of the citizenry there, and was sent to not Germany, but to Toul, France. Now that is right where all of the armies of the First World War, the Second World War, went through to conquer France. We got there, and our quarters were very good. They were stone barracks that had been used by the French army in the past. Well, the company commander said, "No, I don't want to be here. I want to transfer." The only way he could get a transfer was if the base commander would approve it. Well, the base commander approved it. We were sent to the main base with wooden, like tar paper shacks to live in. In that area, heat was provided by a pot-bellied stove. And you didn't stick around and wait for it to happen, but you had to clean the flue. And we would take lumps of coal. We'd get outside and we'd start throwing lumps of coal at the smokestack. And if we got one in there, it was fine. We could run, get out of the way, because that smokestack was going to belch ash. I mean, it was going to belch ash. But we accommodated it. We kept it up. We excuse me, folks. Each little shack had six people in it, and our duty stations, our patrols were two MPs in a car on a highway patrol, two MPs in a Jeep in a city patrol, a desk sergeant, and if it was a real payday weekend, they had a walking patrol in downtown Toul. That's when things really happened. One of the things that happened, I got called out on an automobile wreck. I got there, and one of the GIs said, "Hey, you really need to help us. This policeman's going to shoot us." Oh, no, he is going to shoot you. But I want to tell you something. This is French soil, and if he chooses to shoot you, he can do it. No questions asked. Our duties were to patrol the area. And the Army, in its efforts, off limits to certain establishments was what we had to patrol. And if we saw a GI in one of those establishments, we had to take him and write him up. I found a way we've had one, a bar that was off limits. We snuck around behind things and rolled up quietly to it, and the GIs saw us coming, military police! So they took off. One guy took off and he fell and knocked himself out by falling on a rock. And he came to and he told the surgeons, he hit me with his baton. The baton that all the military policemen use was about 15 to 18 inches long, bigger than my thumb. And the doctor looked at him and said, if he had hit you with his baton, you would see a gash there, not a bruise or abrasion. That kind of shut him up. They had some areas out in the countryside where the communism was forefront. And we were told, don't go there, ever. I would sneak around a little bit and go make sure that there's nobody there. The city of Toul had a fort on a hill close by. Connecting the city to the fort were tunnels. Those were definitely off limits. The ordnance in the tunnels had never been cleared. There could have been explosive happening in there if anybody went down there and didn't know what they were doing. My stay in Europe was exactly what I wanted. When they first told us where we were going, I did a yes. I got to travel extensively in Europe, Spain, Italy, Holland, England. It was just an interesting adventure for me to see all of that. One thing that I learned about the Dutch, they were so far ahead of us. Now this is 1954. They would harvest their tulips. Let me get back here. The fields, tulip fields, were laid out with water between the rows. And then they could take a small shallow draft boat in between the two rows and pick the tulips that way. They didn't use any kind of machinery. It was all hand picked. And when they got that little shallow boat got to the end of the row, there was a bigger boat that they would transfer everything to. And it kept on progressing this way to a bigger boat. And finally, they would harvest the whole field. Folks, that's about all I have. It was an interesting adventure for me, and I cherish it.
Thank you, Good. Brother Bob Frank.
Is this thing working? Can you all hear this in the back? Okay, good. If my throat wasn't so bad, I would start off with a version of Off We Go Into the Wild Blue Yonder, because I've heard that many times. As a kid, I used to look up and see airplanes go over and dream of flying, and had all these great visions of flying. And then when I got to VMI, of course, I had to choose an ROTC program, so I naturally chose the Air Force ROTC. after VMI, I went into the Air Force. I first went to some base in Texas for 6 weeks. I think it was 6 weeks of officers training. Then I went to a bit, let's see. After the officers training, I went to I cannot think of the name of that darn base. Anyway, I went 6 months at Bartow, Florida in primary flight school. I flew the old Texan T-6. You remember that yellow T-6 airplane? I flew that for 120 hours. Then I went to Laredo Air Force Base in Texas and went into the T-33 jet trainer. 6 months later, I got my pilot's wings, which is something you're always proud of course. And then I was sent to Craig Air Base in Alabama, which was truly in the heart of Dixie. While I was there, I was in not a primary flying assignment, but I was assigned to the maintenance department, and they had 120 T-33 jet trainers. And every time they had an engine change or something of that nature, I had to take them up and test fly them. I got a lot of takeoffs and landings with very little flying time that way. But it was a good experience anyway. Then I got a chance to go to advanced jet fighter school. So I was sent to Williams Air Base in Arizona, where I learned to fly the old F-86. You remember that? That was the primary jet fighter in the Korean War. It goes way back there. And then I went to Nellis Air Base in Nevada. That's always been the base where they fly the latest jets and train the latest jets. And I trained in the F-100, which was the first supersonic jet plane at that time. After that, I was sent to Itazuki Air Base in Japan, which is in Kyushu, southern Japan. That was a 2-year tour, which I thoroughly enjoyed. And one of the things that surprised me about that was during the war, the Japanese had been such notoriously bitter, vindictive fighters. Once the emperor said, lay down your arms, they did it. I never met a rude or mean Japanese person the whole time I was in Japan, which was quite surprising given the circumstances. But before I was due to get out of the Air Force then, I had about 30 days leave saved up. And I took it all. I'd always wanted to go for some reason to Sydney, Australia. So I hitchhiked from Japan to Sydney, Australia, which is about halfway around the world. That was not by automobiles, but by airplanes. I got a flight down to Okinawa with an American plane, then down to the Philippines on an American plane. Excuse me, Singapore on a British plane. Then down to Darwin, Australia. And then an Australian plane across Australia to Sydney. And if I had had my way, I might still be there because they were the nicest people I ever met in my life. They were our staunch, best allies in World War II, and they're just great people. So I came back then, got out of the Air Force, went back to Lexington, Virginia, went through 2.5 years through law school. That's a lot of years in a small town after VMI. Then after law school, I worked at a small law firm in Norfolk, maybe for 9 months or so. And they had me doing the most trivial, mundane stuff that you could think of, and it was not very appealing. As I was over at the officers club at Langley having a drink at the bar, I was a civilian. A bird colonel in uniform walked up next to me and ordered the drink and wanted to know what the hell are you doing in my club, Civvy? And so I told him I'd been in the Air Force and what I'd flown. And he told me about a brand new plane that was coming out. He talked about it and said it was going to be the fastest plane in the world. And it was the F-105. That's this plane here that I've got a model of. If you get a chance and want to come on it, please do. But the more he talked about it, the more he could see I was drooling at the mouth. And when he left, he gave me his card. He said, I'm at the Pentagon, and if you as interested as you really appear to be, you give me a call before you decide to come back in, and I'll get you assigned to this new wing of 105s that's going to be McConnell Air Base in Wichita, Kansas. So I checked with the wife, who was young and adventurous. She agreed, so we did, and I signed up, and off we went back into the Air Force. Went to Las Vegas, where you check out in all the latest fighters, and checked out in this 105 in Las Vegas. Excuse me, I'm about to lose my voice. Then we were sent to, what was the name of that base? McConnell Air Base in Wichita, Kansas. Spent 2 years there. Then, after that, I was sent to Itazuki Air Base in Japan, flying the F-105, and that was a wonderful experience there. Then I got out of the Air Force. I went to work with a law firm in Norfolk, Virginia, which was, they gave me every mundane, worthless job you could think of. That was not too exciting. So when I went back into the Air Force, I went to Wichita, Kansas, where I flew this 105 for a while. Then I got sent to Bitburg, Germany. That was a nice tour, flying the 105 in Bitburg, Germany. Got to travel all over Europe. Then they sent me back to Nellis to recheck out in the 105 after I'd been flying the F-4. They made a two-seated version of this plane, and they put an electronic warfare officer in the back seat. And the mission was called Wild Weasel, and was made to go after electronic opposition on the ground. So at Korat Air Base in Thailand, it was a very interesting mission. That was during the height of the war over there, during the Vietnam War. The B-52s were going over there, bombing up the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and we had to have two of us go in with the B-52s. They'd be up around 45,000 feet, and we'd be down at 20,000 between them and the Nome SAM missile sites. And we had to roll in on the SAM missile sites before they could get the missiles to the B-52. It was a very interesting mission. So anyway, after that, I got out of the Air Force, got discharged, and came back to the States. Went to law practice in Salem with two lifelong friends, and ended up practicing law there for another 25 years. But thanks for listening to me.
First of all, I would like to, as a preamble to what I'm going to say, but a brand new ensign going in the Navy would expect to be assigned to a ship or to a school. Majority of the ensigns, I'm saying, or probably a good majority of them, that's where they ended up on their first assignment in the after they received their commission. But I had a very unusual duty assignment myself. I was ordered to active duty at the conclusion of my ROC, ROC, I'll more on that later. At the end of the ROC school, I'd already graduated from Davidson College, and I was to proceed to Hawaii via the San Francisco to join the staff of the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, better known as CINCPAC Fleet. Admiral Hopwood, the Rear Admiral, was in charge of that at that time. I was assigned to communications, and there were approximately 25 junior naval officers assigned to that center for communication to handle the classified messages, encrypted and decrypted, all of confidential, secret, and top secret. On each watch, I'm going to describe the 4 watches that we have that ran the comm center, but there was one top secret officer per in each group. So if a message came in and it was rang top secret, then you call the top secret officer to finish decrypting it. I will add that the last 8 months of my 2-year tour, I was the top secret officer for my section. There are 4 sections to operate the comm center. Each section had about 6 officers, and including one top secret officer. Each section worked 3 days, 24 hours off, then 3 more days as the evening tour for 3 days, and then they were 24 hours off, and then they went to midnight for 3 days, and then you got 72 hours off. That's 3 days. So that really allowed, if your body could assimilate that change over a 12-day period, then it allowed you a lot of fresh time to look around, see Hawaii. I could not leave the Hawaiian Islands. In fact, I had to get permission to go from one island to another. But I managed, obviously, to go to the Big Island and Kauai, or the other 2 islands I went to. I lived in the senior officer BOQ at Makalapa. That's where all the officers, mostly junior officers, stayed who were bachelors, and the married had their own housing elsewhere. The senior officer BOQ was a very nice spot. It provided 3 meals, and it had a wonderful, beautiful swimming pool outside, and tennis courts, and the beach volleyball was not very far away. It was a lot of fun playing beach volleyball on the beaches out there. Okay, how in the world did I get here? You know, UPERS would make the assignment. Someone in the UPERS area would make the assignment. So I'm going back to 1949 to 53, where the 4 years I was at Davidson College, which is about 30 miles north of Charlotte. And at that time, the Davidson had an Army ROTC infantry, I might add, the unit, and it had been at Davidson for many years. The first 2 years, you were required to take 2 years of Army ROTC. Every freshman and sophomore had to take a course in Army ROTC. The last 2 years, you were selected or not. If you were selected to take the 2 advanced corps years, then you graduated as a second lieutenant in the infantry, I might add, and somehow that really didn't run my engine up very high. So now remember, this is the Korean War. Korean War started in '50, and you'd have to live through it to understand how much pressure there was with a lot of young people about where they were going, what kind of service they were going to go into, or just be subjected to the draft. But I decided that I've always liked the Navy ever since I was knee-eyed or grasshopper. And I, in the spring of '51, went to Charlotte and joined the Navy Reserve, as did probably 20 and maybe 25 other Davidson students did the same thing. And we knew that the reserves, Navy Reserve, was starting a new officer program. Probably started in '50. They were trying to gear up to get more naval officers on duty with the Korean War out there. And the Academy and OCS and NRTC was not producing enough Navy officers, so they created the school. We applied, and you had to be in the Navy Reserve to apply. As far as in the junior year, my junior year, I suspect all of the Davidson students applied for the ROC program. And as far as I know, we were all accepted. They were looking for 1,250 candidates for the ROC school out of 10 to 12,000 Navy reservists across the country, because it was a countrywide effort and put together. School ran 2 summers, 6 weeks each summer. So your sophomore year, your junior year would be the last year you could get in, because you could do 1 year to your junior year and 1 year to your senior year after you finished. Once you completed the ROC program and you had finished college with a degree, you were ordered to active duty. I graduated from the ROC program on August 14th, 1953. I had finished Davidson on June the 1st of that year. So I was ordered to active duty immediately upon receiving my commission. So I flew to, ordered to fly to San Francisco. I took a couple of days off and reported in. They said they had no room for me and didn't have a space on a flight to fly me to Hawaii, so just stayed in the hotel. And if you don't hear from me, from the Navy by 10 a.m., then you're free for the rest of the day. Well, I had 7 days like that. So I really was able to get a nice venue of San Francisco. I spent 2 years in Hawaii in communications, and the following 18 years in the reserve program, going to training duty every year. And I retired in 1973 as a commander, which is comparable to a lieutenant colonel in the other services. Among the events that I was invited to, this was I can't tell you, it was a pretty social outfit. My white uniforms, the dress uniforms, I must have worn 4 to 6 times a year. There was always something formal going on. But anyway, The one event I'm going to tell you about was when CINCPAC, there was Admiral Stump. He was a four-star admiral. We had three admirals there. Admiral Stump was a four-star. Admiral Storrs, who was a deputy director under him, a rear admiral, and then Hopwood, who was CINCPAC fleet. Admiral Stump gave a senior officer reception in the BOQ and invited two junior officers to it. I think that was a standard for a senior officer reception. They wanted to entertain the president of South Korea, Syngman Rhee. Some of you may remember that name, and his wife, who are coming back from Washington to go out to South Korea. And after a couple of checkoffs, and finally convinced him that I had been invited to this reception, I went down the line. I shook hands with Syngman Rhee and his wife, and it was a very pleasant event. The other event, which I'm going to comment on, is not a Navy event, but I think you'd be interested in what happened here. In January of '55, it was announced over the radios and what have you in Honolulu that two celebrities were coming into Honolulu International Airport at 8 o'clock that evening. It was nighttime. So not having the duty, I grabbed my Argus C3 camera and took off for the airport. Once I got there, I worked my way up to the fence along with 200 other people, and I realized I was halfway between two exits, and that was not a good position with that many people there. So the plane came in at 8 o'clock and taxied up to where they were supposed to, and out came the first person was Marilyn Monroe and her new husband, Joe DiMaggio. They were on a honeymoon going to Japan, and I stopped there. And Lefty O'Doodle, who I think, I'm not a baseball fan that much, but I think he played with Joe DiMaggio with the Yankees. But anyway, he was out there and welcomed them. And as soon as Maryland came out on the platform to go down the steps, you can imagine, I mean, maybe I can't imagine how magnetized she was, that everybody had to be looking at her up there on that platform. So I had an impulse. To jump the fence, which I did. It's about a 4-foot fence, and I jumped the fence, and I didn't go run out, I calmly walked up for about 30 feet and joined into the press photographers up there who were snapping away their pictures. And I worked my way to within about 4 feet of Marilyn. And at that point, I snapped 3 photographs of Marilyn and Joe and Lefty in various forms, and a couple of Hawaiian girls who were quite pretty too. You'll see. But and then they went on out, and I just realized that no one stopped me. No one ever questioned what I was doing. You know, it was just one of those incidents that happened that normally, that the security would have done something with me, but nothing ever happened, so I came out clean. So what I want to do is this is the first public showing of these 3 photographs of Marilyn. They're mine. I've got the negatives, and for 67 years since I took those photographs, I'm now bringing it out for the first public showing to you all of that event. It was really remarkable. Then there's one other slide I'm showing, which I think is the first one, is a shot of Kilauea crater eruption in the Big Island in March, I think, of '55. It was I remember it was at a night shot, and I didn't take it. I had to buy it, and you'll understand why when you see it. But it's absolutely just blows your mind to imagine. That's the way I felt when I saw an eruption. I saw two of them. That this is like about the only way I know of where new Earth was being created was by those eruptions. Either layer on top, or if it rolled out to the sea, you extended the island. You know, it's really fascinating. So at this time, I'm going to ask Buster to roll the scene.